Great. Well, greetings all. Let's see, got to get rid of that. Um, we're grateful and delighted to welcome you to this lecture. It's my honor to introduce our speaker today, the amazing Suzanne Moore, skydiver, car hop, architectural renovator, art director, avid earth builder, and innovative freelance artist. These are all passions that Suzanne has pursued. She's a powerhouse of creativity and has created over 60 large-scale manuscript books, totaling more than 1,600 pages of original painting, drawing, and lettering, and 120 edition books. In addition to this impressive output, Suzanne was one of 2 Americans on the Wales-based team creating contemporary interpretive illuminations for the St. John's Bible. Suzanne was born to a family of gifted innovator engineers, which, along with her gifts of math and science identified at an early age, led to curiosity about how things work and a rich creative journey. Suzanne dives deep into researching the content, materials, and techniques for her books, resulting in unique bookwork. She weaves word and painted image with form, content, and structure, inviting the reader to engage, examine, and inquire. Her books blend abstract and representational imagery, rich color and surface treatments, with textual content, contemporary lettering, and typography to create work that obscures the line between word and image, legibility and abstraction. Her work is shown widely and is collected privately as well as by institutions such as the Morgan Library, Wellesley College, the Library of Congress, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, the University of Washington, and the Bodleian Library, which is pretty fancy, and our Harrison collection here in the Bay Area, among others. Suzanne teaches contemporary manuscript design, conceptual book design, and shares her techniques and experiments in painting and collage techniques widely in North America and abroad. She is in the process of creating an online community, the Word and Image Studio, to be launched later this year. We'll have to ask her about this in Q&A if she doesn't tell us about it in the lecture. Suzanne and her husband, internationally known design bookbinder Donald Glaister, live in Tacoma, Washington. So, Suzanne, it's all yours.
Thank you, Elena. So I am unmuted. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you to everyone who has joined us and those who will be able to watch this on the Friends of Calligraphy YouTube channel. And thank you to this lecture committee of Nancy, Evelyn, Raul, and Elena. Elena was my contact, and she exhibited amazing patience as we're in this very crazy time of moving again. My love for and appreciation for the Bay Area and the Friends of Calligraphy is rooted in the fact that I moved from Pigeon Falls, Wisconsin, population 198, where the sign when you enter the town on the highway says, "Welcome to Pigeon Falls, where every one," 2 words, "is important." And people spoke Norwegian on the streets. And I moved to the North Beach, and my life was the second year of the year-long class with Thomas Ingmeyer at Fort Mason, City Lights Bookstore, and just walking San Francisco on foot everywhere. And the exposure to the lettering world and then the bookbinding and fine binding world led me to look for a bookbinding teacher, and that's how I met my husband. So the Bay Area is really, really in my heart. It was an extraordinary place. I moved there in 1981 and lived in right below the Coit Tower, and then moved to Palo Alto and had the great fortune of designing and coordinating exhibitions of rare books and manuscripts at Stanford University. And my working space to design the exhibitions and lay everything out before it was installed was in the lock stack of the green library, which 5 people had the code to get inside that space. And it had everything from 9th century papal bulls to Mozart manuscripts and Matisse's jazz, and they have the finest collection of French fine binding and livre d'artiste outside of Paris, which they are working hard now to make more accessible to people. It's wonderful. So every time I get to reconnect with San Francisco, it is kind of a homecoming. So thank you all. So Elena and I thought, oh, I should, maybe talk about this book that was recently purchased by Friends of Calligraphy in concert with the San Francisco Public Library. And it's a book about the letter Q called um, Rescuing Q, Quandaries and Queries. And I'm going to start with a little backstory of how and why I came to make these books about letter forms and about the digit zero, and how letter forms became really the subject of painting and lettering and printmaking in every way I could imagine. Early on, um, the woman that recommended I go to study with my future husband, Don Glaister, when I was finished studying with Thomas, he and I had a wonderful conversation, and he suggested, well, this is kind of how I do it. That might work for you. And I went to talk to Stella Patri, who lived to be 103, another friend of ours who was a centenarian. And I said, Stella, Thomas is suggesting that I teach and I do some original work, kind of like he did. And she said, my dear, set a goal for yourself that no one you know has accomplished before, and see how close you can get to it. And it was the most amazing um, recommendation, because it made me look farther than what I knew and what I knew people were doing, and what Thomas was doing, better than anyone that I knew. So to make a life as an artist. So with that in mind, I was searching for something that might be a good goal that would last a lifetime. So, bookmaking and what I learned by exposure to amazing books at Stanford and some of the experiences I had there, being connected both to the lettering community and the bookbinding, bookmaking community, has really seeded a very rich, rich ground for me. So, Conjuring Q, this talk is designed to be, it can't be an expansive show of what I've done, because the journey with Q started 25 years ago when we were leaving Alabama after we moved there because my husband was the bookbinding teacher in the master's program in Alabama. And it wasn't working out quite the way we wanted. And so we moved to Cleveland, where I got a job as an art director at American Greetings. And my team was the extraordinary lettering design team, who also did a lot of concept development and created the entire lines of cards, which is what my boss really wanted me to do with this extraordinary group of people. So you should know that I have parallel projects that I work on at the time. And, the biggest one that surprises people is probably that I had a full-time job at American Greetings. For the first 5 years, I worked on the St. John's Bible. And the St. John's Bible um, invitation came to me after I'd taken the job at American Greetings. So those two things didn't allow me much time to even teach. Other times in my life, there have always been multiple commissions and this edition work going on. So when I say I worked on it for 25 years, I did, bits of it as I was keeping up with a pretty active schedule of creating work for mostly commissions, but also speculative books, which are books that I decide I want to make. And then our dealer, Priscilla Juvelis, was brilliant at finding homes for them. So this is a glimpse of the journey with the letter Q over 25 years, 4 states, 6 different presses, and 2 print mavens other than me. I want to begin a bit farther back, so I'll share my screen. So you see the full screen there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I see the whole screen.
Okay, great. So this particular book has its roots in my love of letters. And when I was growing up in our household, if we wanted to make something, we had tools and encouragement to help do it. I had 3 older brothers who were all very gifted engineers. And Char, you mentioned Jet Propulsion Laboratories. 2 of my brothers and my nephew all worked at Jet Propulsion Laboratories at one time. And my oldest brother, also Don, there are lots of important Donalds in my life. Don, my oldest brother, Don, made a mounting device for mirrors on interferometer telescopes that's called the Moore mount. And it and he's the only one of those 3 individuals that worked at JPL that had a degree in engineering. The other 2, my middle brother didn't have a degree at all. He just got on a bus and went directly to Pasadena. And my nephew now works at Jet Propulsion Laboratories, and he he helps facilitate testing of all kinds of devices and specializes in the things that have my oldest brother's mounting device on them. So we were encouraged to solve problems and invent things. And I feel really lucky to have been part of that. My oldest brother, Don, when I came one time to help my mother recover from a broken leg, I brought some handwork to do, which you'll see, this addition work. I was helping a friend do handwork. And my brother looked at what I was doing. And he said, "So this is what you do for a living?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "If this book thing doesn't work out, come to JPL, tell him your name is Moore, and you can join the team." So I always wondered if that wouldn't have been a good plan. But my route was very different. I very early fell in love with the idea that letters had graphic impact as well as carrying information, that the combination of image and word in something like this early medical manuscript were a really, really powerful uh, content for information, conveying information, but also that a book had the physical impact of the reader touching the same pages that the maker had created upon. So that mixing up of DNA and the idea that letters can be imagery. Irene Wellington was a person whose work I looked at a lot. And this beautiful piece that you might be familiar with on vellum is a really lovely combination of beautiful calligraphy and this extraordinary painting. Also, pretty early on, I came across this, which was part of an assignment that we were working on, and I really, it's been a constant in my life. And the Cherokee books that I did in the late 80s to early 90s were called Painted Speech, Speaking to the Eyes, and Tracing Magic Lines. There were 3 of them over 10 years, and then a 4th one. So this whole idea of painting speech and speaking to the eyes, allowing us to embody and color thought is key to how and why I work. This was done in a class with Thomas Ingmar where we were writing to music, and it's poetry that the original page was twice the height of the page on the left that you see. And so the writing that appears horizontal was actually done with the paper tilted 90 degrees. And here you see a suggestion of traditional manuscript design. So the Sumi writing was black on white English vintage papers, and then the staining of the gold, the paper with gold pigment, acrylic pigment, and then gouache and white acrylic ink and gold leaf. These very early books about Cherokee and the Cherokee writing system of an 84-character syllabic system of writing were the first big speculative books I made. It spanned a 10-year time period, and there were 3 books, smaller scale books, and 1 very large scale commission, 122 pages, and it was 17 and a half inches by 13 inches. So really big scale book. And it's part of a collection of Rudolfo Molo in Lugano, Switzerland. So our dealer brought us, introduced us to extraordinary collectors. So this was quite early. And this is the page that when I asked Donald Jackson why he thought of me for the Bible, he had seen this book with Thomas and Stella Patri, who is a friend of Thomas's, in Stella's apartment. She was famous for serving aperitif and inviting people over. And Donald and Thomas were sitting on the couch looking at this book, and Donald said, "I remember the way that book felt, and that's what I want for the Bible." And boy, did he have me on his team. So words as image and letters as imagery are key. And then longer than I've been working on Q, I've been working on the letter A. Part of that was with the Scribes 8 in New Mexico. I had heard about Larry Brady's 100-letter marathon, and I suggested to the group that we make a book about the letter A, but reproduce it, lithographically at the time. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And then I started to study the history and symbolism of the letter A, which, because it's the first letter of the alphabet, it has powerful symbolism and kind of philosophical roots as the opening to language and thought and light in some cultures. These are historic renditions of the letter A. And again, this is just a glimpse of various books over time. There were 7 books about the letter A before I did an edition. It continued on until the time and through the time we lived in Tucson, and I did a series of 12 by 12-inch collages, and which the one on the right really reminds me of kind of the open road in the desert and the heat. It was the one of 4 that didn't sell, and I didn't mind that at all because it was kind of my favorite of the 4. I know I shouldn't have favorites, but it was one. And so I decided I wanted to make an edition book, and I had a lot of the work that I had generated for the Scribes 8 project. And parallel to that, I was working with letter forms in, for instance, a small alphabet book. It was only about 6 inches wide by about 5 high. And so you can see a couple of renditions of A from that book, and then the black and white originals that were some of them generated for the Scribes 8. And I created a book called A Musings or Amusings, and used letterpress and the etching press to do these deep embossings. Embossing has always been a part of my printmaking journey. It's the degree that I got at the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire, about 90 miles east of Minneapolis. Uh, I went there as a French major, and I came out with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in printmaking and drawing, and almost was not allowed to graduate because I insisted on painting on my prints. Bad dog, no biscuit. um, so this gives you a little glimpse of how the work happens. On a manuscript book, about 80% of my time is spent just experimenting, figuring things out, problem solving, and 20% is spent making the actual pages of the book and finishing it and getting it bound. In edition work, you can spread the design over the number of books in the edition. So the first quote edition I did was actually a multiple of all hand lettered books called Alphabetical Collection. And that was one design that I did 5 times. No print involved at all. These letterpress books are possible with the help of my friends who have wonderful studios, wonderful equipment, and generous spirit and brilliance in how to print beautifully. So if I make 26 of a book, it means I can spread that design time over all 26 books, and I have 26 possibilities for homes for the books that people can see the work out in the world. I knew from the start that I wanted hand coloring to be a big part of the work, hand coloring, collage, and always gold leaf, because of course, that's one of the magical things about turning a book page is when you see the glimmer of gold. Jessica Spring at the Springtide Press has an extraordinary collection of vintage type and a lot of text type that she is happy to hand set. But as you know, as you know from spacing hand lettering, where you have more flexibility, you might imagine that spacing type with very short line lengths is really difficult to maintain a nice pattern and get the edges right. So in this case, I gave her the shape of the letter A that I wanted. I gave her a long list of attributes of the letter A, and she picked and chose words and phrases that she could fit into this typographically designed letter form, a letter, part of a letter. And one of the things I found in research that I really love is A-list denotes prestige or status. And then the next one, such associations can have a motivating effect since exposure to the letter A has been found to improve human performance when compared to other letters. um, yeah, so there's a lot of research that is behind the final pages. So creating multiples means that with the help of letterpress to get what appear to be ink lettering on paper, especially when it's printed really well, it's velvety black and ever so slightly recessed into the paper. The colorful print in the back is unique to each book, and I'll say a little bit more when you see that image. You'll recognize the Stimudent letter on the right, and some of those letters that came from the New Mexico project on the left with collage, hand lettering, the little scribbled letter. I just gently drew the letter A onto the page and then scribbled the negative space around it. And the three A's at the upper left and the lower right are stamped with a bookbinder's stamping press with gold foil. This last page of the book is a monoprint that's created by making kind of reverse stencils. So each of the forms that you see, even though one looks like a peace sign and one looks like a sign for the feminine, one looks like an S, they're A letter forms from different African languages, different African alphabets. And so the print comes out with all of the letter shapes white or shades of gray, and then they move around on the plate when you print them. So each page is a little bit different. And then all of the hand coloring is done by layering opaque and more translucent gouache. Nancy, are you there? At this,
Hi, yes, I thought I had unmuted.
okay. I wondered if anyone at this point, before we go on to the Q, have questions that we didn't talk about that, Elena. Are there questions that people would like answered now?
There's only one so far, and it's a general question I thought you could answer at the end.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, parallel to this, I moved to Vashon Island in the Pacific Northwest, just a 17-minute ferry ride from Seattle. And it's in the Puget Sound, or the Salish Sea, as Native people call it. And for the first time in my life, I had access to an etching press with a wonderful group of artist called the Quartermaster Press. It's been in existence now for 37 years, and access to the press and usually being alone in the studio was about $60 a month. It was just extraordinary. So I started experimenting with monoprint, and it had not been part of my experience at all. My one of the mantras in the printmaking department was that I studied in was
When did it start?
1 o'clock.
if you can't make it in black and white, if you can't do it in black and white, don't do it at all. And I didn't know that it is a whole philosophy of design that color, and even from the ancients, philosophically, color was thought to be kind of an excess and feminine and not part of true design. It was kind of decoration only. And for those of you who've seen my work and know my work, you know that existing in an only black and white world might be really painful for me and for a lot of us. So these experiments with printmaking and monoprint let me use the techniques that I loved with layering paint in a whole new way. Oops, sorry. I don't know why it's forwarding. So this is a piece that is lives in the Bay Area, and at Ellen Bauk's home. And it's a very large piece that I did for one of the faculty exhibits. And it's a combination of layered monoprints and that have calligraphic forms in them. Quite often I scatter words throughout a piece, and even though you can't read it, I feel that the essence of the word still lives in the work. And you can see details of different kinds of alphabets, different tools that might suggest different languages and cultures. The work on the St. John's Bible, of course, was an extraordinary experience. And I was lucky to get one assignment that was from King's, and the working title, each illumination had a working title, and the working title of this was The Power of the Book. And I thought, oh my God, for a bookmaker, 20 years into my career, what an amazing assignment to get. So the story is that the young king went to a prophetess who it suggested might be the prophetess Huldah, and asked what his reign would hold. And she said, the answer is in the book. And so that whole idea of the St. John's Bible, of individual books, from the tiniest, most intimate books you might see and make to the grandest books that you will never be able to touch, that whole idea of word and image being held within the pages of a book is what I was trying to capture. And so I decided that, and one of our one of the ideas that Donald conveyed to us is that we should really represent every culture and every spiritual tradition and recognize Christianity's roots in Judaism. So the circular form that you see to the left of the lettering at the top of the page alludes to the top of the Torah scroll. And the arc that you see from upper right to lower left is the shape of a quill with on the lower left, the bottom of the quill coming out of sacred geometry. We, Thomas and Donald and I all use the same rubber stamps of sacred geometry to denote the sacred. The two archways that you see are a recognition of the Huldah gates, which are not circular, but these relate to another illumination I did of the Last Judgment, and they allude to the fact that Huldah is the only woman for whom a piece of architecture was dedicated on the Temple Mount. So the research for this and the idea that I was portraying the power of not just this book, but all books, to me was really important assignment. The text on the right, each line is from a different sacred text in a different language, with a distinct letter form. And I couldn't write them on the vellum. I had to draw them and paint them. And that space up there is probably 8 by 8 inches or something like that. And it took forever. And my husband came by at one point and he said, I know what the problem is. You're doing the most complex painting I've seen with the world's tiniest brush, because I was trying to leave all the white spaces around the letters so that they would pop away from each other and create a dimension. So that idea of letter forms as imagery played out in this, certainly. Okay, the Q books. Forgive this misspelling. There should be another RE on the end. And I probably won't pronounce this right, but the Latin verb quaere is to look for, seek, and inquire. And it's the root of many of our question words.
Suzanne, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
We have a question about what are the rubber stamps of sacred geometry?
Oh, you can see them on the right here. See these patterns that have different configurations in gold? I was at the scriptorium for my interview, and there was a sheet of black and white from a Dover book, I think, of sacred geometry. And Donald had an idea that we should use rubber stamps in the Bible. And we kind of said, what? He said, I think it could be a great way to repeat, and when you make a book, especially with so many artists, to have kind of a subtle drum beat or rhythm, a visual rhythm appear in multiple artists' work is what we were thinking. So each of us took that black and white copy and had a flexible rubber stamp made. And we figured out how to use them with gilding medium, and they were to denote the sacred in the St. John's Bible. So it's a flexible rubber stamp. I think I can grab one and show it to you on screen so you can see it. And then I made a little stamp pad of gilding medium to get it to transfer onto the vellum.
Thank you.
So some of the early work that I did with question were explorations of printmaking. I was inspired by the Rilke passage in Letters to a Young Poet on he was answering the young Capus who was asking questions about life. And Rilke said, live the questions and love the questions now, and little by little, you will live your way into the answer. And that whole inquisitive nature, the curious nature really resonates with me because in my family, people are always inventing things, and it happens everywhere in the world. People are just this energetic process of playing out an idea. And so for me, that curiosity is pretty limitless in when I'm experimenting with how am I going to get something to look a certain way and what are the possibilities. So this was a really big plate. The final piece that you'll see is 30 inches by about 22 inches. It's a two-dimensional piece. And on the left is a dry point on plexiglass with kind of a messy inking job. And on the right, you can see that hand colored. And you'll see this arc in the Q book. It's one of the reasons I wanted to show you this. So there's rubbing. It's mostly colored pencil. There's no gouache on this piece. It's layered colored pencil, rubbing, gold leaf, gold tooling, and that corrugated arc that makes up the Q is actually a silk screen. So for a previous book about the digit 0, I figured out how to do pretty fine silk screen work. So this is a flat framed piece. I was experimenting with how the most minimal suggestion of the letter Q, so an arc and a diagonal might work, very minimally and more cut with a collage on the left, and then the very fluid nature of the calligraphic line on the right. So over about the last, well, parallel to this 25 years that I was kind of working on what became the Q book, I was making manuscript books, and there are, I was trying to recount in bed last night when I couldn't go to sleep, and I think now there are 9 manuscript books of different sizes, some as many as 45, 48 pages. So this page spread is 14 inches by 26. And you can see an allusion to letters. So this says question. Sumi ink, gouache, gold leaf on Arches text wove. So when I considered Q, which is such a unique letter in the alphabet, it's related to this big circular form, the universal 1 that I had worked with in an early series of Emerson books. That just occurred to me yesterday after I finished putting this together, that I'd worked on a series of books about the circle, where Emerson and the Transcendentalists believed in the universal 1, that everything in our existence is related. So every tool and every element, every creature and plant, we're all part of this universal 1. And then Q has this quirky, combination of the arc and a crossbar of some kind. And you can still read it as a Q even when you take the rest of the letter away. And you can apply that to any letter in the alphabet, of course. What would the key to the letter K be? And how would you capture the essence of an S or an M? How much can you take out and still see the letter Q? So in this case, I was experimenting on black BFK with gouache on the left, and on the right, every time I went to a workshop over this 2.5 decades, I would work on the letter Q. So I went to a workshop on the East Coast, and we were picking up driftwood and using chunks of wood. And this is a little rubbing that you'll see later in the Q book. So I don't throw things away because there's always a use for them. And the constant of thinking about the letter Q was always this kind of drumbeat behind all the other work and the teaching I was doing. So then the question became, if I'm going to make a book of multiples, how do I capture the energy of the calligraphic form? And how can I use cut forms that are faster and more predictable to make, and how do they play off of each other? So the page on the left is 13 inches, 13 and a half inches high. And this little tiny guy on the right is larger than you're seeing it on, smaller than you're seeing it on your screen. It's only about 3/4 of an inch high. The one on the right is much easier to make in multiples, obviously. So what do you do with that problem of capturing the energy of the form? Should the book have color? The piece on the left is layered gesso. Pigment mixed with methyl cellulose, and on the right there is new pastels in colored paste. Here you see striations in 3 different ways. The 2 on the outside obviously are original works, which again, the question of how to reproduce that comes up, because I don't want to just have a print made and put that print in. I want the work to be real work on the page. And so what role could something like a rubbing have, which can also be used as a printmaking plate? So I designed this little textured plate for printmaking, and then I started to play around with rubbing. So it's that whole question of what is it reasonable to create in multiples? Could I make a painting like this 26 times, a painting that, 26 paintings that raise to the level of equality? So what I decided to do for this book about the letter Q, my first idea was to make it a compendium of printmaking experiments, all these different ways to make a plate and all the different ways to ink them. And what I would do is put one original piece of work to contrast all the printmaking into each book. Then, and monoprint is an option. It's a little easier to recreate similar effects with monoprint, but there's a huge element of the unknown. So, although I love the rich, layered, deep quality of this, reproducing it 26 times wasn't realistic. So this might be one of, if the book was primarily print techniques, I could bind one of these very different folios into each book. So I was making those and experimenting with different ways that I could reproduce written forms and more graphic forms more easily. So I'm seeking, looking, and inquiring full time and having a great time doing it. Early on in the Lettering Arts Guild of Boston, David Foreman, another calligrapher, said to me, "Do you ever run out of ideas?" And I said, "No, David, I just run out of time." And I'm grateful to have work that is meaningful and to share it with people. So every kind of Q rendition was open for discussion and experimentation. In the lower part of the image here, you'll see one of my newest tools that Evelyn brought to the recent Friends of Calligraphy workshop. She brought a little bundle of these long pine needles to each person in the class, and it's stayed on my table. I haven't had much time to experiment, so it will be waiting for me. And this beautiful gold piece in the middle is a solar plate, and we'll see more about how you can see that the energy of the calligraphic movement really is maintained in this plate, because you're capturing a transparency that you've made from an original black and white. So solar plates became a really interesting option. All of the three left-hand images in this book that is now in the collection at Baylor were made with solar plates. You'll see some of these images of the bigger one on the right. And then the little piece on the far right is made by inking up wire and running it through the press. So see this on the right-hand side of the fold, you see this big image, and that is the same plate that I used to make these two images. It's just that the inking and the hand coloring varies dramatically. So from one plate, I can get many different effects, and that was a huge revelation to me. Because the idea behind, traditional printmaking is that you can make exactly the same image over and over and over again. And I use it as a base and a constant when I'm experimenting with getting different effects. So all these forms could be printed, even though the one on the left, which is very light and has a lot of gray tones, you can make a solar plate out of an image like this. And these vary dramatically in size. The one on the left is actually about 10 inches high. The one in the middle is only about 2.5 inches high. You'll see it on the title page of the book. And the Stimudent one on the right is about 3.5 inches high. I had generated so much work that before the last codex, I decided to gather a lot of it into a box and have it to show to people. And it played out the idea that I'm dealing with the character Q, the letter Q, but that these letters do have such distinct personalities. And so one of the folders inside this box that I made is just Q renditions in gold. And the close-up of on the right that you see is gilded paper that's been put in a bookbinder's press with a lot of squishy stuff on it, so that the impression of the screen and the in this case stitched fabric makes it look like, and it's a little easier to see on the left, but I did want to give you a close-up, makes it look like a chunk of gold sitting on the piece of paper. So it's a little collage on a folded piece of paper.
Suzanne,
Yeah.
we've had some questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is about what is a solar plate? Elizabeth Bale asked, what is
Oh, I think it was in California. Let me go back. Yeah. So this gold plate right here is the solar plate that's already been exposed, and the dark part is leftover ink, so you could see the image. And it's made by putting either ink directly on the plate, scraping some off, and using the ink as a mask, and then taking it out in the sun and exposing it. And my class got canceled at one of the conferences, only time it ever happened in my life. And I got to take Louise Grunwald's class on solar printing. And she, before noon, the first day of 3 days, we had already made a plate and were ready to print it. It was pure magic, and it solved the question of how to get these calligraphic forms into a print media that retained that energy. So you put some kind of a mask or lay a transparency over your plate and expose it to the sun or to an exposure unit, and then you wash it with water, and the places that were exposed grab the ink. They make a texture, and you can use a screen to get it to be more subtle grays, or you can do it just directly with straight black. There's a lot online that you can look at.
We have some other questions about the book itself. One is the Q book for sale?
Yes, yes. I have 6 or 7 copies.
And the other questions are the structure of the book. You might want to do that later, but
Yes,
2 questions about the structure.
yes. Would you remind me about that,
Will do.
Lena, later? Yeah. And so, I was continuing, how am I going to make this thing in multiples, because I wanted to make 26 of them. And so on the right, I challenged myself to take a tiny piece of paper, so only about 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and try to get all the parts of a letter Q, an interesting letter Q, out of this tiny little piece of paper. So you can see the torn edge, and you can see where all the parts might have been cut, inside, outside that Q. So, one tiny little piece of paper and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. And this one came from offcuts from that Amusings book that were pre-colored, but I cut the strips off the edges, and it has dozens of pieces. Which one is practical to reproduce? Probably not the one on the left, but the effect is kind of interesting. And here on the right, the person that was asking about the solar plate, this is a transparency that I made on acetate and you can kind of see the shadows because it's sitting away from its background. So you can make these absolutely calligraphic forms on a clear plastic and use them to expose your solar plate and maintain that energy. So the question of how to render all these pieces on the left, some of them can easily be done with letterpress, but not all of them. And in that case, you need a transparency to make your solar plate. What's the difference in feeling with a monoprint, and what kind of depth can you get with a monoprint on the left relative to fresh, original? This is one of the most recent pages that I've been working on because there continues to be a series of Q manuscript books. And my idea that this was going to be primarily a printmaking compendium ended with the arrival of QAnon and all that meant, known or unknown to us. And so I had to rethink and refocus and ask the question, should I still be working on this, or had my letter been hijacked for some other purpose? So then at that point, the Q book became a book of questions and really a suggestion and recognition of the power of the question and the way it can open a conversation and hopefully a meaningful conversation that can continue. So the first page of the book has this. So questions, I generated them. I started asking my husband, and then I expanded it to friends, family, and students. Invited them to send me questions. So you will see on the title page, the author is Suzanne Moore and Friends. So who can find the answers if you can't find the questions? So this shows you a little bit about how it got done. This is also a solar plate, but very tiny. This is the first print I ever did in Louise's workshop, and it's about 1.5 inches wide by about 5 high. And I call her the pedestal Q because she's kind of, quirky and moving on a pedestal. And then I gave her a halo. only with the expertise and the equipment of really amazing letterpress printers like Sandy Tilcock in um, Bisbee, Arizona, who I re-met after we moved to Arizona, and I would drive down and work for a couple days with her. So you can take these calligraphic black and white marks, have a polymer plate made. We use Boxcar in New York, and you can get the feeling of this free black ink line on the page, and then gold and hand coloring give you the details. This wonderful one is from a poet friend of mine on Vashon. If you tattoo me with thunder, will I finally understand nature? Can a mirror keep a secret? Do we dream in a parallel universe? During the pandemic, I took a online class from Yves Leterme on built up letters, and he gave us the exercise to invent an entire page of drawn with a little, you just drew them with a little micron pen, drawn letters. You could pick any letter, and I was working on, still working with A at the time. So this page on the right that you'll see later in the book came from that idea, and it's letterpress printed and then a mountain of handwork. So thank you, Eve, for this assignment and for what it became. Polymer plate was made of that and printed in gray ink by Sandy at Lone Goose Press. And then a mountain of handwork. So the way that the edition work goes is you have the printed page, and then I would work on one letter at a time and do all, if I wanted 26 books, I started with 30 to 32 pages. So you do the same handwork to each letter 32 times. So there's collage, stitching, cutouts, gold leaf, gouache. There's a little bit of marker, some white acrylic ink, and tooling. Jessica Spring has been an amazing collaborator, as I mentioned before, and she and I design work on the press. So I have a general idea of what I want it to feel like. I didn't make any sketches for these. We just work as we go and design the page and keep printing. She has this wonderful, rich variety of vintage type, metal, wood, all kinds of things. And she has just the lightest, most wonderful personality. So the left-hand page, you have to do your experimentation for hand coloring on the real paper and ink. So this page on the left has layers and layers and layers of possibilities, and you can see the page on the right is quite restrained. When I know I'm running over, Elena, so we're getting close to the just run through.
We're enjoying it very much. So
Oh,
keep
good.
going.
So an original piece of Sumi drawing that I wanted to have behind a big embossed letter started out being mostly textural. And then I realized I wanted it to have verbal content. So I moved from on the left working with texture and water and the Sumi ink that I mix with gouache into writing the word quagliare spelled correctly, so that concept of the inquiry would be in the page, even though you couldn't read it. And then when the embossed page goes over it, the embossed Q goes over it, you couldn't read the word no matter what. So some of the questions: how can I live without cookies or love? How did life first arise in the early days of Earth? Can rain be carved into sticks? And after the loss of an extraordinary artist here in the Northwest, Chandler O'Leary, Jessica wrote and printed a card that said, "How do you climb mountains of grief?" Among others. Ooh, there we go. This is that image you saw before with a detail of gold leaf. And one of my questions was, when light and fire play, does the sun shine wryly? A little bit of gold leaf you can see, and the arc shapes are gold tooling with a little tool that my husband invented that allows you to draw through gold foil. So this shows you just a very quickly. I realized later I might have set up another camera and been able to page through the book for you, but this is I didn't think of that, of course, until last night. So I think I will do it and talk about the book and post it on Instagram. So, but this is a page through the book. You're invited to, of course, the Harrison collection to see it in person if you request it. And this is the title page, which you can see that scratchy little drawing, and the gold crossbar is woven through it. Elevated Q with a halo. The big inky mark, and the Q in the upper right is debossed. It's a collage that's painted with acrylic and cut out and then debossed into the surface of the page. The black and white pages. Who do you think you are? What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing, and what do we think we'll see? How can creations be as sublime as Mozart and as dreadful as Hitler? What if your whole life's a dream? Will books become circles? Why is the problem given more space than the solution? And why is the question always longer than the answer? My cousin's husband sent this. He's he's a he's a numbers guy for a display company, and I asked him the question, if you could get the answer to one question, what would your question be? And instead of a one-liner, he wrote, will it be lowercase q rather than the party of Q, a quieter side of Q? Not lower class, but lower case. Not bougie Q, but conversational and thoughtful Q. Not brash or bold or logo-like. Brilliant. And my best friend from childhood wrote, why is it that trees with diverse skins reach out to help one another, and humans with a rainbow of skin colors struggle to come together? So I call this page the gaggle page, because it's kind of a gathering of personalities, like a flock. And Frida Kahlo is supposed to have said something to the effect that when a door or window is open, it opens for everyone. How can we summon and marshal forces to finally wage peace? Thanks to everyone who made this possible. My good friend Nancy Levitt, her husband Dave, we call Dr. Dave. He's a wild blueberry weed specialist. He sent me the question, where is Toto? Where is Toto? The colophon I designed digitally, and we had a polymer plate made because I wanted to wet it with this embossing, which I apologize, it's hard to see. It's a kind of saucer-like compressed Q. Oh, that was a little out of order. This one was first. And then each book in the edition of 26 has a unique monoprint in it, monoprint painting, collage. Keep asking questions and opening conversations. I think it's the way forward and the way to finally come together and make connection. And that whole question of what lies beyond can be altered by the quality of connections you make. Thank you so much.
This has been truly a wonderful talk. Thank you so much. You've gotten a lot of kudos. So we do have some questions. First of all, if you would talk about the structure of the book.
Okay, probably the easiest thing to do, I'm just going to go get it and I can show it to you.
Love all these hearts.
So this is what the book looks like. It's cave paper and an abstract Q on it. And each of the folios is, each of the pages is, I think I can show you this. See that? So each inside of the page, which shows, is put in a stack. There's nothing that anybody will see on the outside. And they are glued together at the spine and the forage like a drum leaf, but just spine and forage. And then end sheets are put in, and a set of tapes that are woven into a stiffener for the paper. So there's no glue gluing down the paper itself. It's a limp paper style binding, like limp vellum. Does
Thank
that
you.
answer the question?
I think so. If anyone needs more, please ask.
I'm going to teach a class on that later in the summer. It's pretty simple if you can get your pages to all be the same size and you know, pay attention to gluing and things like that. And you wanted to know about the sacred geometry. See these flexible rubber? So you get them unmounted. And so we all got, I don't have the black and white sheet anymore, but we all got the same sheet with the same size images and had these rubber stamps made. I don't know if other people had theirs mounted, but I wanted mine unmounted so that when and you make a little fabric stamp pad, and this has green gouache in it, but I put it in a jar lid.
Raise that higher.
I put it in a jar lid and pour watered down PVA on it, and then you can put just part of the stamp in it. You're not stuck doing the entire stamp because it's unmounted, you know. And so they look like this. Oh, the light's really good to see these.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And you can see the size of them.
They're big.
Because, yeah, they're fairly big, but remember the Bible is 30 inches tall. It's really big. So they didn't end up looking big on the pages.
May I just tell you something, Suzanne? This is Margaret Morgan from
Yes,
England. Do
yes.
you know that this very day, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is a woman, has been installed, and she has sworn her allegiance on a copy of the St. John's Bible.
Oh,
Wow.
They didn't want to use the Augustine Bible from Corpus Christi College, Cambridge, because it's too fragile now. But, and this I'm going to try and rectify, nobody has got the detail about who made it. They mentioned Donald Jackson as though he did it all himself.
Well, Donald's name is always the name associated
Of
with it,
course.
you
But
know.
this was on the BBC, and I think they need to get their facts straight. So
Oh, that's very,
I'm going to do my best to put them right for you.
yeah, it's kind of you. How did you find that out?
I heard,
That's a big book to swear on.
I don't know. I've not seen any of the video playbacks of the service.
I saw a little thing about it on Facebook
Yeah,
yesterday.
it was
Wow.
not visible. She was only installed this morning, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, the Augustine Bible's fairly hefty, but
Mhm.
that's thick rather than just big.
I watched it live this
Did
morning, and
you?
they had a camera from up in the top of the cathedral looking straight down onto the altar, and it was open out flat, and she laid her hand on it, and you could
Oh,
see.
how fantastic.
I'm sure they'll replay that
Oh,
video.
I bet they will. Yes.
Incredible.
She did it open?
Mm.
Yes, it was laid out flat, and she laid her hand on one of the pages in the images.
Wouldn't be it be interesting to know what image?
Right,
Yeah, what page was
She
she
right.
on?
wouldn't be
Exactly. Yeah,
random. Yeah.
It
yeah,
might have been selected specially.
Yeah.
by her.
And you
Well,
know,
Well, and
yes,
today was the Annunciation to Mary. And
that's
so
right.
a lot of her words, and
um,
as a woman bishop, were referential to Mary and all of that. It was fabulous.
yeah.
Um,
And there were a number of things that St. John's wanted us to take into account when we worked. And one of them was the equal representation of men and women. And
wonderful.
one was what I mentioned, the roots of Christianity and Judaism. One was recognizing all spiritual traditions. Another was recognizing the humanity and the sacredness of every human being, no matter what their station in life. And the big one for me was Donald said, I want you to make images no one has ever seen before. It's like, okay, you got me. You know? Yeah, yeah. And I don't think
Raoul
anyone could have
posted.
ever imagined how that project has rippled and is rippling out into the world. The ways that people use those books, they take them to prisons. They make them available. There's an Episcopalian campus in Seattle that had a sign outside their gate that said, we have this contemporary Bible here for you to see. Come in and visit. And people literally came off. I was there one day. Someone came in off the street with running clothes on and said, where's this new Bible you're talking about? You know? It's just amazing how people use it, you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
I was going
Yeah,
to
but
say that
I thought you'd like to know that.
Raoul posted a link in the chat to the swearing, or to when she was, what's the right word? Juliet helped me, when she was
She was sworn in.
sworn in. I didn't know if that was the right word. It sounded too judicial. Anyway, the link is there in the chat, and somebody else in the chat also posted that the Globe newspaper says it was open to Luke 1.
All right.
But
The word
Margaret,
is installed.
Yeah.
installed, that's right. I knew that. Anyway, Margaret, we're going to leave it up to you to contact the BBC so that you can
I'll
let
do
them.
my best. I want to kick ass. They should get their facts right.
You
Yeah.
know,
Okay, I have a couple more things that I
Sorry.
want to make sure we cover. You wanted your name in the chat. I put it there. It's Scarlet Paints 33.
oh, yeah, my Instagram will have the most current information about what's going on, and it's Scarlet Paints 33.
And someone wanted to know where your work is in Princeton.
Ooh, they would have multiple libraries, like a lot of big campuses. I'm not sure. Because people use it, it's the Zero book that's at Princeton, and that book is called Zero Faces of Infinity. And I'm told that now with these amazing, expansive systems, you can find where a book is. If you put my name and Zero Cipher of Infinity, you can probably find which library it's at.
Great.
Private institutions are a little trickier, but think I think you might be successful that way. That was sold through my dealer at the New York Book Fair.
Great.
There's a number of really good links being posted in the chat. So if you go to the chat down at the bottom where you see three dots, you can click on that and save the chat, and you can save it to your desktop. And that way you'll have access to all these wonderful links that Raul stays on top of and constantly puts information in. And one of the questions about the Bible being here in the Bay Area is, yes, there was a family in Lafayette that bought the entire heritage collection and donated it to the Cathedral of Light in Oakland. And they in the vestibule they have one copy out there that's always open, so you can go and see it. I've talked to them. I want them to have the other 6 volumes out there so that people can, have more access to it. So we're working on trying to get more of the copies available so that people can come
They
in.
take a whole room to display all of them,
And I wish it was like the Book of Kells where each day they change the
I
page.
know. I know. They do that at the Mayo Clinic.
Oh,
They turn a page every day at the
yeah.
Mayo Clinic. Yeah, in Rochester.
Okay. Well,
We
it's
have
such
one more
amazing.
question from the very beginning, and it was Peter. And Peter, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Let me see how I worded it. Um, so, I was aware of your work very early in my career. Howard Glasser introduced me to a lot of calligraphers in my early 20s. I'm now 65.
Hmm.
Um, I teach at a college, and what would and I have for my whole life been inspired by letter forms and use letter forms in all my work. What advice would you give college students to explore calligraphy and letter forms? Like what would convince them that this is something that they could devote their life to?
Oh boy, this is a question.
It's
I
tough
feel like,
because, everybody thinks, well, I'll go into design and I'll make money.
yeah. And because my husband and I both have made our living only from making work and from teaching. Um, and that has its ups and downs. I will say that the dealer we had who retired during the pandemic, um, as far as I'm concerned, made this creative life doable as a professional. I could make a living doing it. after she passed away, I always knew how extraordinary she was, and all the other book dealers said, well, if you have Priscilla representing you, you don't need anybody else. And when I left American Greetings after 5 years, I said, Priscilla, do you think anybody cares about my work anymore? And she said that she had kept my name in printed material and in conversations. She said, you wouldn't know it, but I have. And before I left American Greetings, she had 2 years worth of commissions lined up for me. And for 15 years, it never stopped. I'm not sure what I would say to a young person who wanted to do this life, Peter. I'm sorry that I can't say, oh yeah, dive in, it's easy. It takes, and it's not that you can't do it, but I'm as concerned as the next person for how young people are going to make it in this world, because I don't feel that I won't say easy, but I don't think the same opportunities are available to young people. If I were going to do it now, I think what I would do is find a day job that I could love. And as a lot of my bookmaker friends in the field, professionally or not, um, they have made a living doing something that they love, sometimes related to the book world. And then when they can and have time through life, take advantage of making work of their own. I'd have to think about it more, I guess, Peter, because I haven't had it directly from young students. We had an apprentice that was on fire and really talented before she came to us, and she spent 6 years with us, and she has been very successful making multiples, printed books and doing fine binding. But she has to do both. She has to make multiples and fine binding to make financial, have a balance. It's like any business, you have to have some diversity in it. I'm sorry, this is so business-like, but that's the reality of it. I want young people to do this, but and it's a different challenge now than when we started, you know. Yeah, I'd have to think more about that. Does anybody have your contact information, Peter?
I'm not sure. I could easily drop it into the chat.
Okay.
But,
And
Suzanne, would you tell us about your word and image studio?
oh, we bought an extraordinary. Let me back up. My husband is the director of fine binding at the American Academy of Bookbinding and Telluride. And that allows him to play out an idea that we had when we were about 50, which was, okay, now we have to think about how we're going to give back, you know. And so he has Telluride to develop an amazing community of people, along with many other teachers and the amazing Chip Schilling, who is directing it. And I don't really have a place where I can put some of the knowledge that I would like to share with people. So we bought an extraordinary piece of land with a view of the Salish Sea and of Mount Rainier. And I was going to build a brick and mortar place that people could come to and work together, teach, learn, all those things, collaborate. And the pandemic and was a time when we lived in Tucson, so we were going to move back here. And then with the election and the scare about materials, construction materials, we just decided that the stretch was too big. And I was really disappointed that I couldn't have a physical place. But I taught some classes on Zoom and was really surprised at how well people did on Zoom. And sometimes it's hard to replicate that in person. It was scary how well some people did. It's not for everybody, but it worked. And I took classes that I just adored. So I decided in the middle of the night one night, wait a second, the Word and Image Studio can be virtual and everybody can come. So there are calligraphy sites and there are book sites. And I look at a lot of painters' sites, and I belong to a couple of painting communities. And my idea is that it will be a place that people can come and get small pieces of information, technical information or ideas, or see much bigger, more complex things. You can take classes. I've already started talking to people about whether or not they would contribute. So it's kind of not just for calligraphers, not just for, book people, but in my online classes, I designed them for people in with using other techniques that wanted to put words in their work. So I had fiber artists and painters and book people and calligraphers, but I had a whole array of people that just valued the word and wanted to figure out a way to put it in whatever medium they worked on. So it's kind of an open arms. What can we do with words?
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
Well,
you'll
thank you.
tell everybody when that's available, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Anyone else with some last minute questions? You're getting many kudos. Everybody.
Lots of hearts. And remind me how I save the chat.
At the bottom of the chat, there are 3 dots, and you click on that, and it takes you to a thing that says save chat. But I'll send it to you, Suzanne.
It's in the top of my chat, the 3
Oh,
dots.
it's in the top. Yeah.
Okay. Mine's at the bottom. They're all different. Anyway, I'll send it to you, Suzanne, with the recording.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to stop the recording at this point. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Thank you for